The word requisite simply means required or indispensable. Ross Ashby, a British psychiatrist and cyberneticist, came up with the law of requisite variety from studying biology and how organisms adapt to their environment. A side note, cybernetics is the study of systems, the system's structure and its possible outcomes and constraints. So the law of requisite variety means simply this. In a system, a person which is most flexible is the most dominant. What does this mean? That in any given situation, there are always so many options. The one who is able to self-regulate themselves in any circumstance will be most flexible in noticing many of the possibilities and therefore can act accordingly. Rather than being reactive, they may choose to ask questions. Rather than making hasty decisions, they may choose to gather data from other parties involved. It's behavioral change at its most base level. I'm going to read 3 short paragraphs from the Law of Requisite Variety by Robert Dilts. I love this short intro because it ties everything back to systems theory, in my opinion, which is important, I believe. The law of requisite variety is a fundamental tenet of the systems theory, having to do with the necessity for variation and flexibility within a system. This law relates to mechanical, biological, and social systems, and has profound and far-reaching implications for how we manage our organizations, our clients, our families, our health, and our lives. According to systems theory, our bodies, our societies, and our universe form an ecology of complex systems and subsystems, all of which interact with and mutually influence each other. This is super important. It is not possible to completely isolate any part of the system from the rest of the system. Thus, all of the interactions that take place within a human being and between human beings and their environment follow certain basic principles and rules of systems. Biological and social systems, for instance, are based on certain self-organizing principles and naturally seek optimal states of balance or homeostasis. The law of requisite variety states that in order to successfully adapt, achieve, or survive, a member of such system requires a minimum amount of flexibility. That amount of flexibility has to be proportional to the variety that the member must contend with in the rest of the system. So, one of the paths to greater flexibility in life is forgiveness, letting go in the moment, letting go of needing to accept the invitation for an argument, letting go of the need to be right, and most importantly, letting go of that which no longer serves you. This all stems back to my statement that I say so often: are you needing to be right or in relationship at this moment? If you're a lawyer or an engineer and needing to construct a case or bridge based on facts, then being right is actually radically important. So I'm not actually referring to these circumstances. When a situation presents itself, and there are many opportunities throughout the day to practice this, choosing to be in relationship is a far more effective managing and maneuvering style of communication. The challenge is, how do you stay in relationship while also being right? It's not about just being right. It's about coming forward in relationship and still offering facts, always from your side of the net. So when someone comes to you in blame or accusation, rather than steeling yourself, right, holding yourself tightly together and becoming defensive, desperately seeking for the facts, slow down. Take a deep breath and ask yourself, so what's going on at this moment? And then move into maybe some empathy guesses. Ask the person, are you feeling frustrated right now because the project's being delayed again? Are you feeling irritated because I'm late in a payment? Are you feeling anxious because things aren't being done the way that you'd like? This is a very different way to connect with someone and interact with them than choosing to be right and finding all the facts to back up your case. There's a story that I often share, which is I was in class one day and I had my colleague come meet me for lunch, and she drove to the restaurant and my class was running late. The irony is that my class never runs late, and I had told her not to be late because she often ran late. So this time I was running late. And she couldn't find me. And when we finally did connect, she was so upset. She started actually yelling at me. And all I did was say, wow, I'm noticing that you're feeling really frustrated right now. I am so sorry that you're having that experience, and I'm sorry that I'm late. You're really feeling stressed because you have to get back to your meetings. And I kept doing things like that. And the more I shared in that way, the more I did empathy guesses for her, the more she softened. To the point that within 3 to 4 minutes, she just stopped and said, yeah, actually, it's okay. I'm feeling a lot better now. Let's just go get some lunch. And when we debriefed after lunch, what she shared about the experience was she was allowed to come forward with her feelings, express them, notice that there was space between us for her to express them because I could hold them for her, and then she could release them, and we had a great lunch together. And of course, I was then able to apologize for my tardiness. This is the level of connection, of being in relationship, and for her to still be right, because she was right, I was late. But the way that it was handled was with much more compassion, much more empathy, much more connection, and with the goal of being in relationship. One of the things that society needs improvement with is grief. We are a culture that says, buck up, stop crying, get over it, move on. Mourning takes time. And when we feel hurt by words uttered from our significant other in a moment of frustration, or an action that felt disrespectful from a coworker, or simply when we get cut off while driving, we actually need to grieve the experience so that the system can release it. By me giving empathy guesses to my coworker or colleague, when I was late and she was frustrated, she was able to then release her expressions, her feelings. And it was a way of acknowledging and grieving about it, even though it only lasted 1.5 to 3 minutes. It was still an acknowledgement, a grieving process, and a letting go, which created spaciousness for us to reconnect and have a great lunch. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross wrote a book called On Death and Dying. It was published back in 1969. And this book is about the 5 stages of grief. And depending upon the situation you are needing to release and move through, each stage will vary considerably. Keep in mind that this is not a linear process. The 5 stages of grief that Elizabeth came up with are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. So denial is about pretending that everything is okay and that the person might even be trying to shut out the reality and develop a false sense of reality. Anger is about finding who's to blame, saying, how can this be happening to me? Bargaining is about renegotiating with yourself. I'll do anything to get that promotion. I promise I'll never eat that piece of cake again. That kind of experience. And the depression piece is kind of like giving up. When we arrive at acceptance, We're surrendering to the situation. We're saying we're going to accept how things are. If we can get to consent, then we can say okay. Consenting is again about allowing and noticing what is and choosing to release it. I talk about consent in the spirituality track. Acceptance is just below consent. If you want to learn more about consenting, please make sure to watch the spirituality video, Reflecting and Refracting. This is where the letting go process becomes really important during these stages, so that you can find yourself more and more often landing at a stage of acceptance, at surrendering to life's turbulence. When someone cuts you off on the freeway, or you have a disagreement with a coworker and you find yourself angry, how can you begin to intentionally move toward letting go? What are some of the ways in which you can begin to let go of the anger? How do you step into relationship with them rather than holding on to the need of being right? Forgiveness is part of that letting go process. Forgiveness is the part of the acceptance equation. Forgiveness fosters the ability to have multiple perspectives on the situation. It gives you more flexibility in the moment, and it gives you space to see possible situations you may not have even noticed or thought of before. So being flexible is not just a yoga thing. On a side note, if you feel inclined, write a letter to yourself apologizing for all the ways you may have transgressed yourself. Allow yourself to be fully vulnerable and open, and to finally let go of that which you may have been holding on to for far too long.